We want to bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired U.S. Army General Wesley Clark. General Clark, I appreciate your being with us. Priya, to you, you've been reporting on the conditions for these service members for a bit now. You had a chance to speak to 5 of these troops who've expressed these objections to the way this war is being carried out. What is the objection? What are they detailing to you in these conversations?
Yeah, I think this is so interesting, Peter, especially because Defense Secretary Hegseth has tried to boast about the number of recruits coming into the military. But now we're seeing at least one of these groups saying that they're processing 150 conscientious objector applications. Another group told us they're getting over 400 inquiries about how to get out of the military every single month since this war in Iran started. And essentially what these service members are telling me, one in particular that was deployed to Operation Epic Fury, is that they were being asked to target and bomb civilian infrastructure, which of course is a violation of international humanitarian law, according to the Geneva Accords. I also spoke with 2 service members who were deployed in support of Operation Southern Spear, which of course is those boat strikes you were talking about. We've seen about 60 of them over the last year. 210 people were killed. And they basically told me that they don't feel as though there was any intelligence or justification to prove that the people on those boats were in fact narco-terrorists. And they believe that in the process of those boat strikes, they perhaps were killing some innocent civilians. I want you to take a listen to what one of the leaders of the groups who's helping these applicants had to say about all of this.
We talked to people who, were true believers, who joined out of a deep sense of duty and of service, and have gone through this profound, deep moral exploration of what they are capable of doing and what they have seen over their lifetime, but also the past several years, and in particular, the actions with Southern Spear and Epic Fury have caused them to completely change in their beliefs and what they're able to be part of.
And by the way, Peter, a lot of them also cited that Manab school bombing where 150 schoolgirls and teachers were killed.
That was on the first day of the war in Iraq.
Exactly. And the United States has never claimed responsibility for that. But I think this surge in civilian deaths is also something that's incredibly concerning. Another thing I want to point out really quickly is that these service members aren't afraid of dying themselves. They're just not behind what's going on. And they don't feel like they can look themselves in the mirror when they're killing people and they don't believe in the cause.
If they're willing to give their lives, they want to be willing to do it for a cause that they can stand behind. General Clark, let me ask you about this. How unusual is this in your experience? Not just that these service members are objecting, but they're now actively looking to leave the military.
I'm sure we had these problems during Vietnam. I was a captain. I was a company commander. I had troops there who they were drafted. They did their job, but many Americans went to Canada. Others did everything they could to get out of being drafted, feigning medical injuries and things like this. And it was an unpopular war by the time 1968, 69 rolled around. It wasn't when it started, by the way. So whenever you have an unpopular war, and this war in Iraq, Iran does not have the support of the American people. It does have strong support in the Republican Party, but by and large, independents and Democrats don't seem to support it. And so naturally, you're going to have people who are disaffected in the ranks.
One of the criticisms, of course, is that President Trump, when this war began, didn't make the case to the American people about why it was necessary. I also want to ask you about what we're learning. The Army, I should note, is responding to the New York Times description of the service as rudderless, saying that their leaders exemplify excellence and are pushing the mission forward. But I want to talk to you about some of this reporting that we've been detailing here. When Hegseth took office, there were, I think the number is 10 four-star generals, now 5. That's the fewest in decades. How does the military maintain its effectiveness, General Clark, when it's losing leaders with this kind of institutional knowledge, especially at a time of war?
Well, at the lower levels, this is not visible. And so the commanders at battalion, brigade, maybe division level, just ride through this. They're concerned, they're watching it, they're hearing things, but they're going to do their duty. And this is the great strength of the American Armed Forces. And so when you see these headlines, yes, they're headlines, they're political. And you've got to put the burden where it belongs. This is a problem for the United States Congress and for the White House. The Congress approved Secretary Hegseth's extension, despite some concerns about it. President Trump is supporting him. And so I have the full faith in the United States Armed Forces and the people who are in them. They're going to do the best job they can. They're going to try to soldier on despite this turbulence at the top. But you do have to acknowledge that this is a matter of concern, especially for let's say the flag officers, the 1 stars and the 2 stars out there who see this, and they're very careful about what they say. They're very careful about what they're doing. They know that there's some sort of culture war aspect of this that's making them uncomfortable. But they're going to do their duty, and they're going to do the best they can to carry out the orders of the commander-in-chief.
And I think ultimately, obviously, it speaks to the voices that are in the ear of Secretary Hegseth, who is clearly one of the voices in the ear of the president right now. General, the Washington Post also reports about the Kid Rock investigation. Folks may remember this. This was the flyby by a military helicopter outside his property as they were, looking over the pool there, the Statue of Liberty faux statue there as they celebrated this moment. The Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, is defending the general who had, I guess, approved this, saying that he's the kind of leader that the Army needs. But is this normal for an Army's number 2 officer to tell the top officer to drop an investigation related to an ally of the president? That they dropped the investigation into this?
I think what's normal is that something like this would be investigated, because we've had instances like this before. We've had soldiers who would steal a tank and drive it to downtown Colorado Springs or try to get to Denver, things like this. And it always results in an investigation. You don't just say, hey, great job. And in this case, there's some political overtones to it that are very disturbing, because we want our armed forces to be politically neutral. We don't want them to be out there on one side or the other. And I think the armed forces have done a really good job of that on balance ever since the Vietnam War. We've really tried to be politically neutral.
You just imagine if something like that continues to happen, right? You all of a sudden have sort of Army helicopters showing up at birthday parties for allies of the president. In fact, that's what they were doing there for Kid Rock. Let me ask you, if I can, Priya, about this again. The USS Abraham Lincoln, as you led the reporting on all of it right now, the conditions they've had, it's now on its way back home to San Diego. We should note you were based during your time with the Navy in San Diego, Coronado as well. First on MS now, of the 2 destroyers that were deployed with the carrier, there were 3. 2 of them are now staying behind right now, right? What more do we know about this, and what's the potential impact? Family members are speaking out, saying, hey, we want our loved ones home too.
Absolutely, Peter. One of them actually told us that they find this disrespectful. Typically, a carrier strike group has an aircraft carrier and 3 destroyers. Like you said, each of those destroyers have about 300 sailors on board, and they're tasked with protecting the carrier during this deployment. And they face many of the same supply shortages that we saw on the carrier, food and hygienic products, not in large quantities. And they also have been facing a lot of morale issues, too. And we just discovered that the USS Spruance, which is based out of San Diego, and the USS Murphy, which is home ported in Hawaii, are not going home. Their deployment has been extended once again. We already know what that does to the morale of these sailors. And so their loved ones simply want them to also be part of their conversation. And they want people to discuss the fact that these 600 sailors have essentially been left behind in the Middle East. We, of course, reached out to the Department of Defense, who said that, this happens sometimes with carrier strike groups. They don't always stay together. But Navy leaders at the beginning of this month had said that they would all come home together.
Still historic record-length deployments for so many of these sailors and Marines, not just sailors who are aboard a lot of those ships. General Clark, one last question to you, if I can. ProPublica is reporting about how top commanders told Pete Hegseth not to cut what is the civilian protection program. They effectively run around the room, and the folks said to him, yeah, we want to try to keep it as intact as you can, even if that requires some cuts. He got rid of it anyway. I bring that up because obviously we have seen the death toll among civilians rise as a function of this war, as we were speaking about earlier, that first day where that school was hit, more than 100 children killed there. Just your takeaway about this discarding a program that was designed to limit deaths among civilians.
Well, we know in the military that if you kill innocent civilians, it's not only wrong, but it also it discredits the armed forces, and it brings a lot of political pressure, and so it's wrong. It undercuts the mission itself. So that's why the commanders were speaking up for the need for this. We were very careful in my campaign in Kosovo. We tried to screen every target. We looked at possibility of collateral damage. We had experts who did it. in the Joint Staff, and that has been beefed up in the 20-odd years since that time. So I would hope that we'll keep that program in place, and if it was reduced, we need to put it back in place. We have to protect innocent civilians as best we can when we're accomplishing the mission. It's part of the mission.